Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Roadie on the Horn podcast. This is episode 28. Today is August 13th at time of recording. So we got quite a bit of sports news to get into today. So really looking forward to it, as we do every single time we record. But with that, I'm going to introduce my awesome co-host, as always, Donnie. How are you doing today?
Just living the dream. We're actually recording at a normal hour today, which is just fantastic because usually it's either like 8 o'clock or later. It's been recently, so we're getting a nice midday record in. I'm feeling good. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, doing well. As you said, actually a normal podcast when it comes to recording. It's the afternoon right now, so that's really nice. But yeah, as I said, we got a lot of sports, a lot of baseball, football, hockey as well. So a lot of sports going on right now. But yeah, Donnie, usually I pick how we start our topics, but I'm gonna defer to you this episode, Donnie. How do you want to start our podcast today?
I think there's no real way to go about it other than talking about, the Rangers getting the number one draft pick.
Yeah, that's a good choice. Obviously, big news there with the draft lottery. We saw that this week with all the teams that lost in the qualifying round having a chance. Kind of an interesting draft lottery. Obviously, this was the second draft lottery that we saw, given that the fact that we didn't know who was going to be picking first, but it didn't end up being the Rangers. So obviously, they have the chance to pick first and take Alexis Lafreniere. So obviously, that's going to be a big ad for the Rangers, assuming they make that selection. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Donnie, you're the Ranger fan here, so I want to hear your thoughts on what you thought about that.
Um, I don't know. First off, the whole process was weird. I knew everybody coming in. There's a team you had to complain about. Everybody had a little bit of a team that they were just not thrilled about. And it seems like I don't know, our general friend group was not thrilled at what just happened, considering mostly Devils and Islanders fans. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's such a weird process. Just like thinking about it, like these teams just qualified for like a playoff spot. It's like some of these teams went to a 5 game series. They went to game five, and could have been in a playoff series very easily had they won that game five. So, I don't know. It's definitely they talk about a lot of franchise altering moves or whatever. Like this may be franchise altering in like the best way possible. I think. It's that the Rangers have never picked number one or haven't picked number one in recent years. Obviously, the last couple decades. Missed out on the number one pick when they had the best odds with the Crosby draft about 15 years ago now. So you finally get a franchise player alongside a team that is rebuilding fast and furious style here, I'd say. So um, I don't know. I'm still a little bit in shock that it happened, considering you just don't expect your team to get number one, especially after a season they had where they were in the playoff hunt almost all year, if not all year.
Yeah, that's for sure. Obviously, that should be a big ad for the Rangers. And now, when you think about it, if we can just kind of assume that they're going with Lafreniere, you're looking at the Rangers, and we're talking about a team now that has some of the best wingers already in the league. Obviously, you're adding to Artemi Panarin, who's a finalist for the Hart Trophy. You just re-signed Chris Kreider as well, and then when you add in Lafreniere for next year, that should be a really, really nice forward core for the Rangers that they're looking at. So that should be a big ad and an immediate impact for the Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not excited as a Rangers fan, you're a little bit lost here, considering I think Lafreniere is as close to um, the tier two draft talent that you're looking for. I don't think that he's gonna end up being like McDavid or anything like that, but you could end up with a superstar here fairly easily. It looks like. I mean, this guy is being compared to stylistically aspects of his game are so just so strong as a prospect that it's surprising to see comparisons of guys like I saw somebody talk about how he could turn into a Tyler Sagan esque type player without the size, and that's like okay, you're giving me Tyler Sagan on my hockey team. I'm not going to say no, and obviously that's just one part of the game. It's like good skater, great playmaker all the way around. And these are things that will translate over. We don't know how well they're going to translate over, but having that type of talent just gifted to your gifted to your lineup after you've had one of the best offenses in the league, you sit there and just like, oh, it's like sometimes things aren't always bad, right? Like, the hockey helped me for once.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there, and I definitely expect that Lafreniere should make the jump to the NHL right away next year. So should be an immediate impact there for the Rangers. But obviously, that's big news. Kind of a funny part of that draft lottery too was kind of the process. Obviously, we've never seen a second part of a draft lottery before. So if those of you who were able to watch, Gary Bettman had to confirm the logo of every team. That was
So
really strange.
strange.
Yeah, we had to go through logo by logo, and he's like, "Yep, confirm. That's the logo of the New York Rangers." Like, yeah, I definitely know that, and they don't do that for the regular draft lottery. So I don't know why they did that, but yeah, that was really strange.
Yeah, I don't know. They're trying anything to make sure people don't think they're rigging things. I guess they're really just they've gone so far down the rabbit hole that this is what they have Gary Bettman talking about logos and shit. Like I don't know, man. This is never gonna happen again, probably. So like, what does it matter? But it was so strange, honestly. Just the weirdest like little setup, and then everybody complaining about how the guy controlling the balls dropped the Rangers ball in because it was heavier and it was weighted and all this. I've seen so many conspiracy theories. It's like, guys, just relax. Like, if you're gonna talk about rigging the lottery, you should talk about how Edmonton and New Jersey have had like 5 of the top 10 or top number 1 overall picks the last 10 years. Like, think about it. I don't know. If they were gonna rig it, why would they rig it for Edmonton or New Jersey? But yeah, I don't know. I've seen so many conspiracy theories and so many just angry people in general, and I think it's very funny to think about like how can you get this mad over something that they literally just confirmed all the balls and everything in front of your face, like.
Yeah, that was a little strange. But one thing I would say I did like about that was the fact that it was all fully live. Obviously, when we're talking about the regular draft lottery, they do the rotation of the balls kind of behind the scenes, and then they have to check to make sure that the code is according to the specific team. So the fact that it was all fully live, they picked the Rangers ball right there on live TV. I thought that was pretty neat. So we'll see if there's any elements to the second draft lottery that makes its way into the regular draft lottery once we get back into the normal years. But yeah, kind of an interesting second draft lottery they saw this week. But I know obviously Ranger fans should be pretty fired up to have the opportunity to pick first, obviously right after a year when they had the second overall pick when they took Capo Caco. So some nice young talent should be added there for the Rangers. But I think that pretty much touches on that for the draft lottery. We can shift over to the teams that are still playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Obviously, that still be going on. Just started this week after the qualifying round. We saw one of the longest games in the history of the NHL. Obviously, that was big news between the Blue Jackets and Lightning. A 5 overtime game that ended with Braden Point. So that was an insane game. We saw Corpi Salo make the most saves ever in a game. I mean, that was just a ridiculous game. But yeah, Donnie, what were you thinking when you were watching that game?
Oh, I mean, you have to feel bad for whoever loses. I think at that point, like you play 8 periods of hockey. Regardless of who loses, you have earned a win. Both teams have earned a win. If you can sit there and defend for 5 periods after giving up 2 goals and then heading to overtime, and not giving up a goal for the equivalent of like 100 minutes of game time, it's pretty ridiculous. You think about. Obviously, you kind of have to feel bad for Corpusalo more than anything because he put up 85 saves or something ridiculous like that. It's like, first off, goalies are usually spent after the first 60 minutes. It's like I've seen so many just post game interviews with guys like Henrik Lundqvist where he is just drenched in sweat, tired, sitting in the locker room, just like dead. And so think about doing 3 of those games, and it's like it was kind of surprising to me how alive the players were, especially in press conferences. It's like Seth Jones brought up some officiating issues, where he felt there were some maybe shortcomings that the NHL didn't call correctly. Um, but yeah, I was just shocked that they interviewed these guys and they were all they like I don't know. It seemed like Seth Jones could have played another 6 periods and been fine, which is like insane. And it goes to show just what type of like endurance and what type of shape these guys are in. I don't know.
Yeah, Seth Jones playing 65 minutes. I mean, that's just ridiculous in a playoff game and actually played pretty well throughout it all. But obviously, Tampa was able to come on the winning end of that. And it seems like when some of those games happen, if you're, say, Columbus, I know you were talking about how they were complaining about the officiating, but I mean, hey, we all know when you get to playoff hockey, there's a different set of rules. And then when you get to playoff overtime hockey, it's an even different set of rules that referees, it's got to be blatantly obvious for them to really call it. We saw a delay game penalty late in one of those overtimes, but that was a super interesting game. Definitely a game that's going to be talked about for a very, very long time. So that was pretty cool to witness this past week. But yeah, that was pretty interesting on that matchup. Obviously, we'll see how that impacts Columbus. They just played a 5 game series against the Leafs as well. That was a pretty good series in the qualifying round. So we'll see if fatigue starts to set in. Obviously, we have a little bit less time in between games. No travel, obviously, with everybody still being in the bubble. But we'll see how that impacts things there in that series. But with that, I think we can move to another one of the series that's going on. Obviously, the Chicago Blackhawks and Vegas Golden Knights. That was an interesting game one, at least from my perspective. Vegas coming out on top looked really well. And kind of one of the interesting storylines that I wanted to bring up here. Obviously, the impact of Robin Lehner, former Blackhawk, was traded away at the deadline, and now all of a sudden he's playing against the Blackhawks in this playoff series. So I thought this was pretty interesting. Just the fact that I feel like there's a little bit of narrative, like how much of an impact, like did the Blackhawks have the advantage? Does Vegas have the advantage? But at least when I look at it, it's pretty much just comes down to how good are the teams in general. I really don't think that if the Blackhawks played all this time against Robin Lehner, that they have this significant advantage. Like they know all of his weak points. I still think Lehner's a good goalie. I don't think there's a significant impact there when it comes to the Robin Lehner storyline.
Yeah, and I think realistically, everybody knows everybody's weaknesses going into games anyway. It's like if you have 20 or 30 games, you have a guy, you have a video coach literally looking at all these things and writing down how the goals went in and all that, analyzing his stance and such. It's like you could have a goalie on your roster for 15 years and he could end up on another team. You could still be very confused by how he plays. It's goalie is all about mannerisms, I think, and I mean it's like you can change some things around to exploit things like that. And it's not like it mattered anyway. I think Vegas pretty much dominated possession the majority of that game, and it felt like, um, you know, I don't think Patrick Kane had the best game one that he was looking for. He didn't have exactly what he was looking for there. Neither did the rest of the high quality games. I think David Camp was the only goal scorer for Chicago in game one, if I'm not mistaken, based on I think it was a Brandon Saad masterclass performance to get the puck and then feed him, if I remember correctly. But um, I don't know. That's gonna be a tough series. I don't think Lander makes much of a difference for them in terms of like seeing him for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 games, whatever they played with him throughout the year. Yeah, I don't know. People will make excuses and all that. I think just Vegas is a different team, and I think with Laner or not, they're still going to win the game. Probably still going to win the series. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's interesting considering Chicago was like basically considering like selling everything at the deadline. It thought, or that was at least the rumor they were going to make some trades, and then now here they are in the playoffs against the goalie they sold off. It's just such a weird narrative. But I mean, you wouldn't expect anything else out of 2020, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree with your points there. Yeah, you mentioned David Camp, the only goal scorer. You're going to want to score from some of your top lines. That was one of their strengths, obviously, in the series against the Oilers, but Blackhawks going to need to get some offense going if they want a chance in this series. Obviously, Vegas can score as well, and you mentioned the goaltending impact. So we'll see how that goes out, but Vegas up 1-0 so far at time of recording for us right now. But yeah, Donnie, were there any other series you wanted to touch on here that we've seen so far in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Let's say I just think teams that have the home ice advantage or teams that are considered the higher seeded team, there's no you don't get really any advantage. There's no boost from that. So I guess we're really gonna see, and I think this is interesting. I think we're really gonna see just the best team is gonna end up winning it. Whoever is the hottest team, whoever's playing the best hockey will end up winning it because there's no advantages, no nothing. It's literally just like go out there. It's very neutral ice, no fans. Whoever can coach better, whoever can play better, end up winning, and that's. I don't know if you could say every year that the best team wins the Stanley Cup. Usually, it's the hottest team, but I think we should end up with just the most talented, most skilled team end up winning the Stanley Cup this year, which is it's good for our picks at least. But I don't know. It takes away a little bit of the question marks of teams like it's like coming into this, people thought Edmonton might have a little bit of a boost or Toronto might have a little bit of boost considering they're playing in the arena that they usually play in. But obviously that doesn't. There's no there's no evidence for that one after seeing what happened in the qualifying round. So
Yeah, both Toronto and Edmonton already out, and those are the teams that are the hub cities, obviously. So no home ice advantage that we saw there, but yeah, interesting points there. Obviously, we will continue to follow the hockey playoffs. We'll talk about hockey again a little bit later when we get into our questions, as usual. But I think we can shift over now to some news out of the MLB. Obviously, baseball kind of getting into the swing of things. Teams have played, most teams at least like 16, 17 games. Some teams, obviously, with COVID factors like the Cardinals, they've only played 5 games so far, so that's kind of a disaster. We'll see how that plays out, but kind of an interesting situation for the Cleveland Indians I wanted to touch on here. So, so far this year, just to give you a little context on the Indians, they have one of the worst offenses in baseball, but to compensate for that, they have some of the best pitching so far early in the season. But interesting situation they had. So Zach Plesac, one of their pitchers, had a great outing against the White Sox this past week, and then he went out after the game with Mike Clevinger. And as a result of that, the Indians are taking a precaution and making them now quarantine. And they need to test negative twice before they are allowed to return. So that's a big hit to the Indians' rotation. Two of their better pitchers there, again, Plesac and Clevinger. So obviously the Indians taking the precaution there, but yeah, kind of a big mistake that may end up hurting the Indians here.
yeah, I think we've been over this before. It's just like if you're not able to just look out for other people in this situation. It's like if Plesac or Clevenger got COVID, they would have gotten in trouble anyway. We already know this. If somebody sees them out or somebody snitches on them, leaving their houses or whatever, going to hang out at bars and shit. It's selfish and it's fine. for these people to want to live normal lives, but you don't live a normal life if you're an athlete, especially if you're paid millions of dollars to play baseball. You're held to a different standard. You have a different set of code of conduct, set of morals you have to stand by. And so it's like if a normal 24, 25-year-old wanted to go to the bar, it's like that would be fine. It's like understandable that you want to get out and see friends or whatever. But if you're Zach Plesac or Mike Clevinger, both of who have been around, been in major league organizations for a couple years now, um, you have to come to a conclusion that it's selfish, and it's just you're kind of not reading the room here. You probably have teammates. It's like, think about it. Carlos Carrasco is just coming off of he just beat cancer last year, so that means he has a more compromised immune system. And what happens if you end up bringing COVID in the locker room for Carlos Carrasco? He's probably sitting there scared shitless. Um, so it's just, you have to be more vigilant, and more, less for yourself, more for your team. It's like the Indians probably don't have a chance to win the World Series this year. However, they could make the playoffs and make some noise. It's not like they're a bad team. So first off, you're letting your team down, you're letting your management down, and you're letting yourselves down. When you signed on to play the whole 60 games, I think that's the main. I don't know, that itself should tell you, yeah, this next 3 or 4 months, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to just be here for myself and here for my teammates, and that's it. And it's like, you'd like to see a little bit more responsibility out of guys like this, especially guys that I know are going to end up making millions of dollars if they're not making millions of dollars already.
Yeah, good points there. I know I saw a quote this week from Francisco Lindor kind of on this topic, and obviously he's one of the more leader figures on the Indians, and he was really just talking about how, as you mentioned, it's really a team effort in this. When you make a decision like that, you're not just hurting yourself, obviously, given the fact that now you have to sit in quarantine for these two pitchers, but you're hurting your team, as we said. Now the Indians are without two of their better pitchers so far this year. And in that quote as well, Lindor, he mentioned Carlos Carrasco, as you did, one of the more high risk players, obviously, given the fact that the struggles he went through last year with having to get past cancer. But Lindor also said, he was like, when you look yourself in the mirror, especially now when you're a part of a team, it's not just that you're looking back at yourself. You're relying on these people that you're working with in this team on the Indians to kind of make everybody work together and make these positive decisions. So I thought that was good leadership from Lindor, that he wasn't afraid, obviously, to call out his teammates for this decision, and really wants to make sure that everybody is kind of on the same page here, because now we've seen it with a number of teams that have made this decision. Obviously, the Marlins, the first team, and then I know I talked about the Cardinals, who have only played 5 games thus far. They should be scheduled to come back Saturday on a doubleheader against the White Sox, but there's just been a lot of issues going on with some of these teams, and obviously a touchy situation with once you start getting into COVID with actual MLB teams.
I thought it was interesting, considering, as you said, with both the Marlins and the Cardinals. Don't you think these teams would be like very vigilant about their guys not doing anything? Like, you don't want to be the next like little fuck up. You don't want to be the next team that's the laughing stock of the league because you couldn't keep your guys healthy. Um, I don't know. I think that in itself is it shows you a good place as to where some of the athletes in America are. Um, it's like, if you just can't get by without going to the bar with one of your other teammates, I don't know, man. It just doesn't seem like that's a necessary. The social aspect of everything is fine, but you get to hang out with 25 other guys and then coaches every day playing baseball. It's like, that's your social aspect. You don't need an extra social aspect outside of that for the next 3 months. Like, just go through the season, get it done, and then get back at it. Like, go do whatever you want when it's winter time, and you can go out and hang out with Clevinger if you want to at the bars. But like, it's such a selfish move, I think. And obviously people want to live their lives, but this is a different time. You can't really just live a normal life right now as much as you'd like to. Just not possible.
Yeah, good points there. I guess kind of transitioning now, the first episode of Hard Knocks came out this week. I know that's something I look forward to every year. And then obviously, given the situation now, we don't have preseason. So that'll be really interesting. They are covering the Rams and Chargers. And in that first episode of Hard Knocks, Sean McVay, he was talking about that, how we're going to have to do this as a team. He brought up the Marlins in a meeting with the team, that hey, it really just takes one person here. We really need to make sure everybody's on the same page and working towards this. So obviously, a really interesting situation there as it relates to the Indians and some of the other clubs in baseball who have been affected by this. But with that, as I mentioned, Hard Knocks, we can kind of shift now a little bit towards some NFL news we got this week, as well as college football. I'll first touch on the football news we heard today. So George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers, he got paid. Now will be the highest paid tight end in football. So that was a big move for the Niners. I think the Niners have had a pretty good offseason. obviously coming off a Super Bowl appearance, but I think they've done some nice things. Obviously, they drafted Javon Kinlaw. He was one of my favorite players in the draft as well. So good stuff there for the Niners. But yeah, I think a really well-deserved contract for George Kittle, really established himself as one of the elite players in football. He's getting paid really up there with some of the elite receivers, but I think Kittle's value, obviously tight end, maybe not the most high positional value, but I think Kittle provides enough to the Niners where I definitely like that contract for San Francisco to lock him up long
Yeah, I
term.
think it's different with them. He provides so much value. It's like a Gronk or a Travis Kelsey type player. Especially like George Kittle, he's proof to a lot of these guys that maybe not be not as highly touted as some other names. You can make a name for yourself. It's like George Kittle is probably one of the hardest working football players on the field in the league, and that's just in itself. Seeing this contract is a good way for I think younger players or guys that haven't broken in just yet to really realize like this is the dream is going to be tough, but it's real. It's like George Kittle works his ass off, plays hard. He loves the sport. You can see whenever they mic him up or whenever they record him on the benches, he's just so fired up about everything that happens. Um, so I don't know. Obviously, positional value is tough, but he's deserving. If anybody in the league, especially at tight end, where the top end of the tight end list is just you don't see performances like that very often. It's like George Kittle is a special player and he deserves to be paid special money for that.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Great blocker as well, George Kittle, one of the top blocking tight ends in football, let alone his impact as a receiver. So I like that fit and contract extension there for the Niners. So that was good to see for Kittle. But uh, that was an interesting news out of the NFL. But we did get some unfortunate college football news this week that we will touch on here before we get into some of our questions. So the Big Ten announced that they will not be playing football this upcoming fall, and that was followed by the Pac 12 making a similar decision. But we also heard that the Big 12 is still going to officially go forward with their schedule and play, and then we assume that the ACC and SEC will do the same. So really interesting, obviously, when you're looking at the Power Five conferences. I mean, these are the teams that usually bring up the most money, the biggest bowl games, but we have now seen a split between which leagues are going to play, which are not. So now we have so many questions on if players are going to transfer or if teams are going to be allowed to still play a schedule. If they're, say, in the Pac 12 or the Big 10, are they going to be allowed to play some teams in the Big 12? So a lot of unanswered questions, but yeah, that's definitely a really interesting situation going on in the college football landscape.
Yeah, and it's like how football has gone in general with the pros in the last couple of months. You kind of think they've had all these issues. College football is probably going to have even more issues considering they're not as tightly ran and it's more individual and not based on teams necessarily. But yeah, I don't think there's anything surprising about teams or about conferences canceling. We're in a situation where it's like if one guy gets it and then everybody ends up getting it, it's just like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna make a team sit out for weeks and then forfeit their games and all that. Just there's too much. There's too many moving parts, and for a lot of these schools, I think, especially in bad areas or areas that are still, I don't know, considered hotbeds or have just not been able to get rid of their issue, it makes a lot of sense. It's like, especially with those guys, college kids in general, it's very hard to keep them from like making mistakes or going out. I think a good way to go back at it is you look at like I don't know if you ever watched Last Chance U. Um, yeah, these guys are they kind of fuck around. Obviously it's like these guys, a different situation. They don't have any lockdown restriction or anything, but these guys, it's a greater look into college football players' lives, and you see some of these guys just they don't listen to what their coaches say, and I think it'd be a lot of the same if you go to you consider college football. In general, it's like a lot of these guys probably don't have any real reason to in their mind, go out. But a lot of guys are going to be selfish and are going to do their thing. You can't keep track of 100 plus players because I mean it's like a lot of these college programs carry a ridiculous amount of players, red shirts and such like. So I don't know. I think college football is going to be the most difficult of anything because like you can't build a bubble around your players, and a lot of these schools too are they've moved into where they're doing like half remote classes or their classes are hybrid classes or whatever. I just think it's irresponsible for schools to force their players to be on campus. I mean, obviously you can opt out, but if you opt out, if a guy like Gregory Russo opts out, you sit it and look at like, it's a business decision for you, but you're letting your teammates down a little bit. Obviously reasonable at this point with how COVID is, but I don't know. I feel like the conferences that do end up playing, there's gonna be so much fuckery. There's gonna be so many moving parts and so many issues. Like I wouldn't be shocked if we had cancellations or seasons cut short. It's like there would really be nothing surprising to me if something like that happened.
Yeah, I thought you brought up a lot of really good points there, Donnie, especially given the fact that we can't have a bubble. Obviously, we're talking about college programs on a campus, so that's not really a possibility for college football to happen there. And then obviously, you brought up as well the fact that some players are opting out. You mentioned Gregory Russo of Miami, but we also saw Rashad Bateman of Minnesota, Rondon Moore of Purdue, just to name a couple players that decided to opt out entirely and just start to prepare for the NFL draft. And switching to that now, I know, Donnie, you wanted to discuss a little bit the impact that this should see on the NFL draft. And really, a lot of it is still so unknown. Obviously, this is pretty fresh news, but the impact that this will have on the NFL draft, will next year's draft be very weak if players decide to sit out? Will it be stronger if more players are allowed to come out? There's a lot of interesting points there as it relates to the upcoming
Yeah, see,
draft.
I think the most interesting part is just seeing who rises and who falls because of their team not playing or whatever. It's like we're gonna see some probably like I don't know, fringe draft picks not be able to play this year, and it's like those guys will have much less tape, and you're not going to see their progressions over the last year as easily as you would by just watching guys actually play games. I don't. This is the most wild, like I don't know, like 6, 7, 8 months that we've seen in just the history of me being alive, basically in terms of our world just in a pandemic. 5 million people have caught the virus at some point, and it's nothing is nothing's different with the NFL draft. I think we're gonna see I don't know how many players are going to get these like this little boost, but we're going to see sixth and seventh rounders probably go primarily to players that were either, probably more highly touted, but didn't get to play this year, or guys that just randomly made a name for themselves having to play this year. Whereas you don't you have you're gonna have dozens of prime schools where people are drafted from every year just not get the chance to play. Um, I'm curious to see how players will be able to transfer at this point because we're so laid off as in like just the whole thought process here. It's like if you start trying to transfer it in August, I don't know, it's a little bit of an issue. There's a lot of question marks in the way, and I think you could probably answer it better than me. Is like, what do you think is exactly going to happen with certain guys NFL draft stocks and such? Let's say you're not playing this year and you have somebody on a an ACC team that has a good year. It's like there's a guy that potentially losing out on a spot in the NFL there.
Yeah, I think when you initially asked this, I'm thinking about two quarterbacks here. So I'll start with Justin Fields, Ohio State. Obviously, we just mentioned Big Ten not going to play this year. Obviously, there's a little bit of talk with Ohio State still be able to have games, but then you brought up the transfer idea. So say Ohio State's not playing at all, is Justin Fields now going to have the opportunity to even get to another campus? Say LSU, who just lost Joe Burrow, who I'm going to touch on here in a little bit, but school is going to start here in the next couple weeks. Obviously, is Justin Fields going to have enough time to transfer? So much uncertainty there. Obviously, Fields being one of the higher quarterback prospects in this draft, so I definitely think that's going to have some impact with situations like that. And then I know I just mentioned Joe Burrow a little bit ago, but I know Ed Orgeron put out on his Twitter, if there was no season for Joe Burrow, if he was unable to play last year, Joe Burrow would have been a sixth or seventh round pick. And then he ends up playing, has this unbelievable year, and all of a sudden he's the first overall pick. So the loss of a whole season, yeah, that impact is so significant. It's really hard to stress that enough. I think the players in the Big Ten and the Pac 12, they really suffer. Obviously, this is a big loss for them. A little bit of talk that maybe they could play in the spring, but then you bring into so many questions of how will that impact the draft, obviously, and the combine. So much uncertainty, very fresh news. So obviously, very unfortunate. You feel for all the people in those schools. I know Donnie and I were talking about a video of a fifth-year senior on Ohio State, how he was looking forward to coming back. He made a sacrifice to come back and really work towards another chance at a Big Ten championship and playing for Ohio State. So obviously, an unfortunate situation there
The
for some of those
eligibility thing
players.
is very interesting. Obviously, I think the NCAA is going to give everybody a break, but with guys like that who have already, basically used all the little twists and turns that you can get to finesse an extra year of eligibility, I think that's really interesting. And it's also you guys have to make a decision. Are you going to stay back for another year? You're going to basically just piss off another year and then come back for your final year. Will end up being a 6 year for a lot of people, a lot of guys, and I don't know it becomes more of a personal moral decision. It's like, do you want to get in the workforce? Do you want to start your life, or do you want to just wait another year, see if you can break out, maybe get drafted to the pros? It's like I think there's a lot of interesting, just these guys are gonna have to make decisions. And that's probably the least easy decision to make, especially considering it's like these colleges recruit so heavily and they are prepared for you to leave. It's like, what are they going to do when you're back? And they have another 5 star come in ready to go right away. It's like, um, a lot of these guys have had their lives altered, and I definitely understand it. But we have to realize like the situation that we're in right now. It's like this is a different time. It's like Joe Burrow obviously would have been late round pick as you said, and then maybe never pans out to what he is now. But you have to think it's like that's just one or two cases. There's probably a dozen or two cases that happen every year where these guys just become random, like insanely high, risers and everything. But there's also a majority of guys that we could see potentially players, coaches get really sick and struggle with coronavirus. It's like health is more important than anything. People say health is wealth, and I think that's mostly important right now.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I know on the podcast before we've talked about how we've both been a little skeptical that college football will happen, even NFL. There's a lot of questions there. Preseason was supposed to be going on this week, but obviously that's been cut. So a lot of really interesting situations there with football. But before we move on, I just want to bring up one last point here about college football. There was a quote on Twitter from Lou Holtz that was going around in an interview he had, and this was just his quote. I'll just read it here. He says, "Let's move on with life. When they stormed Normandy, they knew there were going to be casualties. They knew there were going to be risks." So Lou Holtz compared college athletes playing football to us storming D-Day. So nice job, Lou Holtz. That's, I think, the most perfect comp. I don't think I've ever could compare two things better than World War II's most significant event to
Yeah,
college football. So good
the
job
old
there.
people, the older generation, they really like these. They like to be stoic and they like to be heroic about things and make college football more than it is. Like, come on, it's football, man. We're not. A lot of people died there. It's like this is different. A lot of people are dying from coronavirus. Just like relax. Just sometimes Lou Holtz's input is just not necessary. I think.
Yeah, I think it could have gone without that one, at least if you ask me. So yeah, maybe keep that one to yourself, Lou Holtz, next time you think about comparing 20-year-olds throwing footballs around to D-Day.
Yeah,
Just an idea,
I
though.
just it just it pains me to see stupid shit like that. Honestly, it just pains me. It hurts my head.
Yeah, that was brutal. But yeah, interesting discussion there. That was fun to talk about there with Donnie. But now we can move on to our questions that we got. We got quite a bit this week again, so we appreciate everybody who asked the questions. So we can start with the same idea. We'll talk about sports and college sports here. First question comes from my friend Bryce at Reniker7 on Instagram. He says, "Is it possible for college basketball to happen this year? And if so, how would you go about it?" So obviously, this is a good point here. We were talking a lot about college football there, but now as we shift over to college basketball, obviously this is a sport that primarily takes place in the spring anyways. So I think an interesting part with college basketball, at least different from football, is that you already have this kind of tournament format when you're looking at conference tournaments and then obviously March Madness. So there is kind of like a bubble, so to speak, concept already within college basketball. So I think there is maybe slight potential, but then again, we're banking on things getting better in the spring and having more potential for sports to go on. But that's just kind of my initial thought that maybe there is a little bit of hope for college basketball to happen since you can have some kind of tournaments. Obviously, you can't have the full regular season schedule, which normally starts in November anyways. So I definitely don't expect that to happen. But I think there is a little bit of hope for college football to have a little bit more of some kind of season go on than,
Yeah, I would definitely
say,
say
college
college basketball
football.
has a better chance. Again, you can't put players in a bubble. It's just not gonna happen. It's like there's a lot of question marks with if that would even be legal, considering all the all the things that they've done in college, college sports in general to make sure that not everybody's getting the same treatment, which would mean if they had a college basketball season for the men, they probably have to have one for women too, which increases the bubble. And then you have random sports like I don't know baseball and such who may have their season cut off moving forward depending on how we're feeling here, and then random sports like volleyball and such that would also need to have their season, and they would probably complain about the bubble. Obviously, there's a money factor that's not necessarily there for other sports, but um, I don't know. I'm really skeptical of college sport in general. I think college sports are probably not as necessary as people think they are. Obviously, you'd have a good time being able to watch college sports. Ryan's the biggest college football fan alive. He literally sits there months after the season's over, just watching tape and preparing a big board and such for the draft, and then he goes right on the next year. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just college basketball is probably more likely because there's less players involved and everything, but there just have to be such a significant amount of testing like comparable to what they do in the pros at least with the MLB. And obviously there's question marks for everything, and players start getting sick, and then again you deal with cancellations and then pushing games back and double headers and such. It's just like there's too many moving parts. I think at this point for them to have a college basketball season, they would really have to have some sort of plan that I don't know. I don't think there's a plan there. I haven't heard anything about anything in terms of college basketball.
Yeah, neither have I. Nothing concrete there. Good shout on college football as well, Donnie. Really looking forward to these West Virginia Texas Tech games because we're still getting Big 12 football. So can't wait for that. But yeah, on a more serious note, there with college basketball, a lot of uncertainty as well. But on a selfish note, I mean, Iowa, this is supposed to be like their best like team coming back. Like there's a lot of hype around Iowa basketball that I'm sure maybe not a lot of people know about, but they had one of the best players in basketball, college basketball last year, Luka Garza. He's coming back, so a lot of hype around Iowa basketball. So selfishly, I'm hoping that we at least get some kind of college basketball season. As I said, even if it's just like a conference tournament, I think that would probably be the best way. But yeah, obviously, very limited situation. You can't have the full 30-game season that we regularly have, and then obviously March Madness. That's a big question mark as well. But I would say at least if we can get some kind of short tournaments within conferences, I think that's probably how I would go about it with college basketball. But yeah, obviously that is a very dynamic situation, a lot of changing parts there. But interesting thought there from Bryce. Fun to talk about college football or college basketball, excuse me. So we appreciate that one. We will move on to our next question here from Jason at Hawkeye 2124 on Instagram here. He says, back to New York Rangers talk. So we'll send it over to Donnie on this one. But I know we already talked about this a little bit, but he says Lafreniere or Byfield
Well,
for
I think there's
NYR
a
at
fit
pick
thing
one.
there. It's like the fit obviously is Byfield, I would say, but by a considerable amount. Bigger player, more strong player, kind of what they need in the lineup. But I don't know. I think the Lafreniere is just a better player. He's gonna end up being a franchise talent. It's like with last year. It's the same question with Hughes and Kako. It's like it's more of a fit thing than anything. But I think Hughes was by and large the better prospect considered. But I don't know. The majority of the prospect ranking guys would have had Hughes above Kako. Obviously, a couple people had Kako higher, but it's the same this year. I think people try too much to be just different or try to be edgy or whatever, try to be out of the way. So they're gonna say, "Oh, Byfield's a better player," but I think in the long run, it's Lafreniere's been like this guy. This has been a coveted draft for years now, and we finally got here. I don't think the Rangers would make a mistake by just going out of their way and picking off the board with number one. I think that would just piss off fans if anything. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I could throw Tim Stutzel in there as well. I think he will get at least a little bit of consideration and be a top three pick. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting discussion. I'm a big fan of Quentin Byfield, big center, ton of skills. So I think if he say goes number two to LA, I think that would be a great fit. But yeah, I think it's definitely a conversation for the Rangers, especially when you look at a potential need for a center for the Rangers. Obviously, Lafreniere on the wing, but I think when you look overall, Lafreniere is the best prospect, as you mentioned. I think he's going to be end up being the pick for the Rangers there. But I think it's definitely a consideration to at least go with Byfield. I really like Byfield. He's one of my favorite prospects, obviously, in this draft. Ton of skill, as I mentioned. So I think he's going to be a really, really good pro. But I definitely expect the Rangers
Yeah,
to go with
I don't know.
Lafreniere
I
there at the
think
top.
people try too hard to make like narratives or create hype for things. It's like I just think Lafreniere's been considered like a top prospect in hockey for like 5, 6, 7 years now. It's like ever since he was like an early teen and his name started popping up. Um, so this is a guy that is like not generational maybe, but like a franchise player, and it's like you just go with it. You can always make space, and the Rangers have such a deep prospect pool that it doesn't really matter what they pick. Hoping that guys pan out. But if you need a center or whatever, the Rangers can always fill in guys like Philip Hedel, who was picked in the first round a couple years back. There's a lot of uncertainty about things, and I don't think this should be one of those things where people are uncertain about it. Honestly.
Yeah, good conversation there. I know we'll be talking about that decision for the Rangers quite a bit here, obviously, with Donnie being a big Ranger fan. So, good question there from Jason. Jason's got one more question for us. This one relating to the Blackhawks. He says, if the Hawks lose to Vegas, what's next? So, I think this is definitely an interesting question. Obviously, when you look at the Blackhawks, we're talking about a team that sold at the deadline, was the last team in the 12 seed in the qualifying round, and then beats Edmonton in a 4-game series. So, that eliminates any chance at them winning the draft lottery and having a pick at the top. And now they're in a situation where, again, they're the 8 seed, the worst team in the Western Conference to make the playoffs, playing Vegas, the 1 seed. So obviously, Hawks down 1-0 in that series at time of recording right now. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting situation for the Hawks. I think when I look at them, well, when you look at what is next, when you look at the offseason, it's got to come down to the defense, obviously. it's just got to improve. They were able to get Calvin Hahn back now for this qualify or for the Stanley Cup playoffs, but I still think they need at least one or two more pieces to really kind of establish themselves back into the Western Conference contender position. I think the offense is nice. I really like what they've done with the forward core, but then the defense is really the area of need. And then again, looking at goaltender Corey Crawford, an unrestricted free agent, and again, I know we touched on this a little bit ago, but trading away Robin Lehner at the deadline, so uncertainty in net and on defense. So that's kind of the outlook I have for the Blackhawks if they
Yeah, I know.
are
I think
unable
we're
to
in
get past
a
Vegas.
very similar outlook here. It's like I think both of us we're primarily hoping for a a chance at the lottery pick and a chance at number one. Because I don't think either of us really thought that our teams could win the Stanley Cup. The Rangers and the Blackhawks both have major defensive issues. They're different issues at this point. I think the Blackhawks are just aging, and they probably need to add a couple guys. Whereas the Rangers, have a little different issue. They have young players that kind of stink. Um, and then obviously goaltending. I think the most interesting part is, it's like, is Chicago going to go out and try to add like a big goaltender if Crawford leaves? Like, are they going to try to add a Holtby or something like that, which would be, I think, a disaster, but, you can't put it past the Chicago Blackhawks front office after seeing, a playoff berth. I think that's a big question in itself. It's like, how are they going to react to this? Are they going to act like, oh, yeah, we're only one or two pieces off, or are they going to really be serious about, returning back to where they were a couple years ago? It's like I don't think Patrick Kane or Jonathan Toews are that old right just yet, so it's like they still have 4, 5, 6 years left in the tank of really, really good productive hockey. So that's a big question for the Blackhawks that I don't think any of us can answer, honestly.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. But yeah, I know you mentioned obviously still a window with Taves and Kane, but then some of the production that we've seen from some of their younger forwards, obviously Kirby Doc in his rookie year has been pretty good. Dominic Kubalik as well, really good in that qualifying series. Alex Sabrinka, Dylan Strom. So as I said, I think there's potential there with the forward core, but just a lot of uncertainty obviously between the pipes. I know when Robin Lehner got traded, that was a trade that was not favorable for me. I thought Lehner could have been the long-term goalie for the Hawks, but unfortunately, that was not the direction they chose. And then again, with the Blackhawks, they decided to fire their team president, John McDonough. So you have a little bit of uncertainty in the front office. How long will Stan Bowman hang around as GM as well? So a lot of questions for the Hawks going into the offseason. I think there is potential there, as I mentioned, like with the forward core, they could. I don't think they're too far off from regaining some of their status in the Western Conference, but I think they definitely need to have a better offseason than they've had in the last few years. Even this year, obviously, we're talking about a team that made the playoffs, but they sold at the deadline. This was definitely not in their plans to still be playing hockey right now. So interesting situation there. But yeah, really good questions there from Jason on our two favorite hockey teams. So we appreciate those questions very much. We can now move on. A couple questions this week from good friend Scotty G at Sports with Scott on Twitter. He says, "Is Seth Jones for Ryan Johansson trade still the fairest NHL trade ever?" I'll go first on this one. Actually, I do not think so. I think Columbus actually came out on the winning side of this. I know we talked about Seth Jones just playing 65 minutes in a playoff game, but I think the value that Seth Jones provides for Columbus being that really lockdown number one defenseman is more than what Nashville has gotten so far out of Ryan Johansson, trying to emerge himself as the number one center in Nashville. So I'm going to go with no on this one. I'm going to say that
Yeah, I
Columbus
definitely
definitely
agree.
came
If it
out
was a
on
couple
top of
years
that
ago, we'd
trade.
be like, yeah, this is just a hockey trade. This is what we're looking for out of two teams with separate needs that have a surplus of talent. Um, but at this point, I think Seth Jones has developed into a fringe top 10 defenseman, and I don't think we've seen anything close out of Ryan Johansson. Um, Obviously, he's a good player. Not saying he's like a mediocre or lesser player, but sometimes you have to realize positional value is important, and you're big on this in football. I'm big on this in hockey. It's like defensemen are more important than forwards at this point. If you're providing a similar skill level, I'd say, especially because I think there's less high end D men than there are high end forwards in hockey, and especially need perspective right now. It's like if the Preds got rid of Ryan Johansson, would they be significantly worse? I don't know how much worse they would be. Whereas if Columbus got rid of Seth Jones, like they might not be a playoff team. Honestly, it's like you have to really think about it like that too.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely, I value defense a little bit more than centers. I think those are the two most valued positions. Yeah, on a hockey team, but I like that the Jackets were able to get that number one defenseman. Obviously, when Nashville made this trade, they still had Roman Yossi, PK Subban, Ryan Ellis, so they had a little bit of depth. But now I think as Seth Jones has developed a little bit, they would prefer to have Seth Jones. But yeah, definitely an interesting trade to look back on now, a few years back. So good point there. Scott's next one here, he says, "How does it feel to have less viral tweets than sports with Scott?" So he's really just hyping himself up because he had a tweet after Edmonton lost of when McDavid was on Erie and he was like going into a locker room and he just screamed. He was like, "Fuck!" And he said cutting live to McDavid. So that was the video and it got like 400 likes. So Scotty just wanted to gas himself up for having a tweet that was good. So I mean, I guess congrats, like good job. How does it feel? I mean, I guess I'm more just like happy for you. Like that's I think what you're looking for with this question. Like, hey, nice job for having a
Yeah,
viral
I
tweet.
think
So there
Scotty
you go.
D
I'll give it to
forgets
you
the
right there,
time that
Scott.
I impersonated an Islanders fan when John Tavares left. That went just crazy viral, ridiculously viral, and then it's like, um, I don't know. Props to you for getting a viral tweet. I'm really proud of you. I think Barstool Chief retweeted it, and that's what happened. That's what fired everybody up. Um, but yeah, it's like Scotty G. You want to come flex? Get a mic and get on the podcast. That's what I say.
There you go. Call him out. But yeah, good shout for Donnie there. He had Bleacher Report tweet him out for a tweet that he didn't even make. So I mean, I guess that gives
Yeah,
Donnie kind of
sorry,
the edge
Scotty.
on that
You did a
conversation. That
great
was pretty
job.
cool.
You're on the big leagues yet here.
Yeah, Donnie one ups you a little bit, but there you go. I'll give you your clap there, Scott. So nice job on that tweet. And then Scotty's last one for us. He says, "What is the best yoga position?" So this was an interesting question. I haven't really dove into the yoga game personally. Like I feel like it would be an interesting thing to try. Like it's beneficial for your health, and you can just stretch and like have good breathing strategies. But like I don't know enough about yoga to like
Yeah,
give you my
it's
insight
like
on
I
like
think
the
if you're
best
gonna
yoga
go to
position.
yoga, I would say go to YouTube. RK and I, not the most flexible of human beings in the world, and I've never done yoga. I don't think he's ever done yoga. Um, I just at this point, I would say probably go to YouTube and figure out the best yoga pose. I mean, it's like had I done the research, it probably would have been something like the flying lotus or something like that, which probably isn't even a pose, but it sounds good. So we're gonna go with that.
Yeah, we'll go with that. My yoga expertise is not up to par to give you a great answer here, so my answer is not an answer. But I mean, hey, yoga it's probably good for you. So I mean, definitely knock yourself out on doing your own research. But my insight will not help you in this situation. But interesting question there from Scott. So we appreciate all three of those. Can move on to a couple questions from our friend Josh. As always, at I Hate Lettuce 2 on Twitter. Great man. Wants to talk about the Blue Jackets as he does every single time he asks questions. And he says here, are the Blue Jackets done? Because after playing the Lightning for 8 periods in the playoffs, they are down 1-0 in the series instead of about to be up 3-0 in the series, like last year after 8 periods. So I know we touched on this series at the start, obviously, that insane 5 overtime game that they played in game one. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think this is a hit to the Blue Jackets. Again, we're talking about a team that was able to bounce back from their crushing game 4 loss in the qualifying series to Toronto, where they blew that 3-goal lead late and then lost to an overtime. So I don't think the Jackets are totally done. I expect them to bounce back. I really like John Tortorella. Thinks he does a nice job with that roster. But I know the Lightning are Donnie's Cup pick. I think that was a big win for them, and I expect the Lightning definitely to win the series. But
Honestly, I don't think
yeah,
there's
that
any
was a
like
really
real
interesting game to look
a
back on.
change in how things go. It's just you lost a game, you get back at it game two. Especially in the bubble, there's no like home ice advantage. You don't have to deal with anything. Any of the fans, just getting mad or whatever. It's literally just a game. Obviously, you played eight periods. A loss, a loss. It's going to be a little demoralizing, but I don't think Tortorella will let them sit on that or stew on it too long. I think probably after the game, they were right at game two. Columbus, they've been here before. They've done this before. Last year, they were around. And one loss doesn't really matter, as they proved last year. They could win 4 straight very easily. If that was almost an effortless victory last year, they looked dominant. So I wouldn't be too worried. I wouldn't count them out. I would just say obviously if they lose game two, we have something else to talk about there. But the second they win game two, everything changes and nobody talks about game one anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's really just comes down to how you bounce back, which is something that Columbus has done pretty well over the last couple of years in the playoffs. But yeah, obviously, when you're comparing it to last year, I think the big notes are that Columbus is now without obviously Artemi Panarin, without Matt Duchene, without Sergei Bobrovsky. So obviously, that's a big change from last year when I know Josh's question here. After 8 periods, they were about to be up 3-0 in the series when they ended up completing the sweep, and now they're down 1-0 in the series. So that was a pretty interesting game. I think this will still be a pretty good series, but yeah, I think I give the edge to the Lightning. I know that was my pick for this series, so I'll still stick with that
Yeah, I
pick
would
for
figure the
the
same
Lightning to
too,
end
but
up
it's
coming out
like
on top of the
I
series.
think that's the easy pick. That's the the no brainer at this point. They lost last year. They just won an 8 game, eight. That's just crazy to think about. Like they played 100 some minutes of hockey without a goal being scored, and but yeah, I think it's fair to say the Lightning are gonna end up probably winning the series, especially after winning game 1. But you wouldn't be shocked if Columbus came back and won game 2 and game 3. Yeah, it's like after we saw last year, especially with no home ice advantage, like literally anything can happen. I wouldn't be too discouraged if you're a Jackets fan right now.
Yeah, good comms there from Donnie. Josh has got a couple other questions for us, as he does always. So, yeah, I mean, Josh's questions, they always get our minds working. So here we go. This one's an interesting one. He says, would you rather have to wake up every morning and walk barefoot on Legos on your way to the bathroom, or every time you get in your car, you get a razor scooter to the ankle? So, I mean, this is obviously two things that is not favorable. Like you don't want either of these things to happen. But I definitely have an answer here. I'm gonna go with walk barefoot on Legos because I feel like there's a little bit of a strategy here. Like you can kind of just like tiptoe your way and watch very like gingerly, even though like stepping on a Lego sucks. Like you definitely don't want to do it. I feel like if you had to do it every morning, you could kind of like get used to it and like work out a strategy to get to the bathroom. And I'm not trying to get a razor scooter to the ankle. That is like the worst pain. And that's every single time you get in your car. Like some razor scooters just like jam into your ankle and you're like, man, that like really hurt. But I feel like with the Legos, you can kind of like
Yeah, no, it's
get
like I
around
think
that
the
a little
Legos
bit. So
thing, you
I'm gonna
can
go with
act like
barefoot
you're
on
like
Legos
six
for
years
this one.
old and the ground's lava again. You can just hop from side to side, try to get around it. There's ways around it. Whereas it's like I'm gonna have somebody come up to me with a razor scooter and just smash me in the ankle every time I get in my car. I just don't want to deal with that, especially if I have to go somewhere. Like you have to rush somewhere and your ankle just hurts really bad and you have to drive. It's just I don't know. I'd rather as soon as I wake up in the morning, it's like you have time to bounce back from that. You don't have time to bounce back from getting a razor scooter in your ankle when you're trying to drive to school or work or wherever you're going. Honestly.
Yeah, I agree with that. The razor screw to the ankle, that is tough pain. Like that is not something you're trying to get every time you're about to start driving. So definitely an easy answer for me on that one. But yeah, really interesting thought. Obviously, two things that you definitely don't want to happen. But hey, if I'm forced to pick an answer, I'll go with the barefoot on Legos. So we'll take that one. Next question he's got for us. He says, since this will probably be released on Friday, which will be my birthday, obviously you're Josh, he says, can you please wish me a happy birthday? So here you go. Josh, you've been on our podcast before. You're a regular question asker. So here you go. If today is your birthday, today Friday, happy birthday, Josh. Hope you have a good day today. But yeah, I mean, you just wanted us to give you a shout out on the pod. But hey, we'll take
Yeah,
it. You've
happy
been
birthday.
a good
That's all
man
you're getting
before.
out of me
So
after
happy
after
birthday,
the
Josh.
bullshit that you pulled the last time we were on here talking about comment. It's just disgusting, honestly. But happy birthday.
Yeah, the comment view is not going away, even though it's your birthday today. So we'll give you that shout, but yeah, there's still issues at hand with your comment shout out, but we'll take that. So happy birthday, Josh. We'll go on. He's got a few more questions for us. He says, if you were torturing someone with music, which song would you pick? And Josh says his pick would be Fergie's rendition of the national anthem at the All Star game. I think this is a funny, very funny question. Like torturing someone with music. So just like playing the song over and over and over. And for me, I'm going to go with Baby Shark. I feel like if you just had to hear like Baby Shark, doo, 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 and you just had to hear that over and over and over, like
Yeah,
that would definitely
that's
torture
a good
you
one. I
after
was
enough
thinking
time
about
hearing that.
actual songs that I've listened to in the past that I just don't want to listen to. It's like you can take Baby Shark every once in a while. I went with Lifestyle by Young Thug because it's basically just incessant like moaning and humming the entire time, and you can't really understand what he's saying. And I think if you play that for somebody for like 8 hours straight, they'd probably go insane. It would not go well. So that's what I'm going with. It's like eventually Baby Shark, you get into it. Lifestyle, it's the same just the same garbage for 8 hours. Not my favorite song in the world, so that's my pick there.
Yeah, just an endless list of
Yeah,
lifestyle.
living life
Donnie,
like it's the
you wouldn't be
beginning,
able to
but it's
handle
just
that.
the beginning over and over. Except he's just you can't understand what he's actually saying. Like you have to go on Genius every time he says anything. So no, that's just I figured I would go with something a little more contemporary, and then not Baby Shark related this time.
Yeah, that's fair. I would say with Baby Shark, like, hey, if you're just listening to Baby Shark like once or twice, like, hey, I can get into it. But like, man, if we're trying to like torture someone, like if I hear
Yeah,
that
I
like
agree. I
50
agree.
times in a row,
That's a
I would
good
lose my
pick.
mind. So that's my pick there. Fergie's rendition of the anthem too that Josh said, I think that's a good choice because I mean everybody was like laughing, like Steph Curry was even laughing during that. So if you had to hear that over and over, I feel like that would also be music torture. But interesting one there. And Josh, his last question here, this one relates to a few questions that he's asked before, so good tie in here. But he says, if you had to give the million grapes to one single person, who would it be? And the note here is you cannot choose the grizzly bear. So he's asked a few questions here, and this one kind of ties them all in. But Donnie, if you now you're gifting out the million grapes. So someone put a million grapes on your porch or in front of your front door, and now you're regifting it.
You
So
know,
you're
I'm
giving
probably
the
gonna
million
give the
grapes to
grapes
one
to
single
Josh. I
person.
feel like
Who are
he
you picking
has
here?
hours of thought behind this, to where he is really considered all the options. And I feel like Josh could probably come up with something valuable at this point. He's asked us this question multiple times now. So obviously he's put some sort of he sat down, took out the notepad and jotted down a cloud or two of ideas, and I feel like Josh could really do a lot of things with a million grapes.
Yeah, that's a good choice. Obviously, Josh, he's thought through his strategy of what would happen if a million grapes came through. So now this is his chance to act. Like bang, you just got a million grapes now. Now you
Yeah, I
gotta
mean,
you gotta go through
sometimes you
with your
just got to
decision
go
now
off
for the
the
million
board a
grapes. I
little
think
bit, and
that's a
I
good
feel like
choice.
Josh is expecting me to say something like you give it to a celebrity or something. But I'd rather just let Josh figure it out. Our my million grapes and your million grapes can go to Josh. He can have 2 million grapes, and then we can see what he does with it.
Okay. That's a good choice. I did actually have an answer though, but that I think that would be funny to give Josh 2 million grapes because he's only thought through if he gets 1 million grapes. So like, bang, how are we handling 2 million grapes? That's a good thought. But I'm gonna go with my answer here. I'm gonna go with Pablo Sandoval. I feel like the Giants, I feel like if Pablo Sandoval just got like a million grapes, he'd be like, dude, no way. I'm gonna just like pound all these down and just
Could
like
you
get
even
down a
eat a
million
million
grapes. I
grapes
feel
if
like
you, let's
Pablo
say you
Sandoval
spent
could handle
16
a
hours
million
a day
grapes.
eating grapes? Could you eat a million grapes before they went bad? Like that's probably not even possible. So you couldn't even get close. You'd have a couple thousand. You'd be sick. It's like but if anybody can do it, I guess Pablo Sandoval can do it. I don't know if anybody's seen Pablo Sandoval recently, but he's looking hefty, hefty, hefty out here. So
Yeah, he's big, and he's still hitting like fifth in the Giants lineup. That's what's going on with the San Francisco Giants. They're still throwing out Pablo Sandoval for whatever reason in their lineup early. And plus, I'll note, obviously playing in San Francisco, a lot of wineries out there. That was my answer. What I would do with the million grapes, it would be donate them to the winery. So I'm giving Pablo Sandoval a few options. Like, hey, if you want to eat 500,000 grapes and donate 500,000 grapes to the winery, like there's your options.
you're
So
such a sweetheart
Panda,
for
there you go. I'm giving you a
just
million
you
grapes.
just made Pablo's day, and that's really great. That's really great out of you. Like I really respect it.
Yeah, I mean it's been tough going for the Giants the last couple of years, so maybe that will give Pablo Sandoval a little bit of upbeat notes there. So there you go, million grapes to Pablo Sandoval. So thanks for all those questions, Josh. Love that last one. Obviously tying in a couple other questions you've asked before, so good stuff there. We appreciate that. We've got two more question askers of this podcast, and both come from members of my family, so shout out to them. But these first two come from my dad. So he says, when a team wins a championship, what do you feel is the world's most recognizable thing that team can receive? So obviously, we're looking here at trophies for a team and the world's most recognizable thing. So my first thought here is going to be the World Cup trophy. Obviously, I feel like that's the most recognizable trophy when you look at a global perspective of trophies and team championships. So I'll go with the World Cup trophy there. He also mentioned the Stanley Cup. I think that's a good shout as well. I think that's a very famous trophy as well. But my answer here, I'm going to go
Yeah, I
with the
would
World
tend to
Cup
agree. I was
trophy.
thinking
Send it over
about
to you,
this.
Donnie. What are
It's
your
got to
thoughts
be
here?
on a national scale. It's got to be a primarily watched by just about everybody. And I think it's fair to say the World Cup trophy is probably it. Um, I was thinking if there's any like Olympic trophy that or anything like that, but yeah, not really anything there. So on a large scale basis, I think soccer is probably the biggest sport of anything that we can think of here. And obviously the World Cup. Literally, non-soccer fans just watch the entire World Cup just to get, like have some feeling, have something there. So I'd say the World Cup's probably the most watched event in the world. So I'd say the World Cup trophy makes a lot of sense there.
Yeah, good answer there. And then he's got another question here that's just going to caveat off the last one. He says, now, when an individual wins a championship, what's the world's most recognizable thing that a person receives? So, obviously, the difference here between a team and an individual. So, Dottie just mentioned the Olympics. So, here my answer is actually an Olympic gold medal. I feel like that would be the most recognizable thing an individual can receive. I feel like that's just kind of like a symbol of excellence if you win a gold medal in the Olympics. So, I'll go with that. And then my second answer here, I know I mentioned the Stanley Cup for the last one, but I'll go with a Masters green jacket. I feel like that's pretty symbolic as well. When someone wins the Masters, they get to slip on that green jacket. That's a pretty good look. But
Yeah, I think that
overall,
makes
world's
sense
most
too.
recognizable
The
thing,
Green
I'll go with
Jacket's
the
an
Olympic
interesting
gold
thought
medal here.
considering it's a very very exclusive club. There's only a handful of people, a couple dozen golfers that have ever accomplished the feat. Whereas there's a lot of Olympic gold medals out there. However, some hold bigger weight than others. Um, yeah, that's an interesting question. I'd have to really think about it. But I guess I mean the Olympics are probably the largest like world scale um, event that goes on. Outside of I think the World Cup is probably just primarily a couple months there, but the Olympics, people look forward to it for years and years and years. And then if you get a gold medal, you have immense pride going back to your nation, especially if you're from a smaller country. Those are really good answers, actually. I didn't think about the green jacket nearly as much, but I think that's a really, really good thought process there. Yeah, I'm really
Thanks,
proud of
man.
you.
Thanks for the support there, Don. I appreciate that. Good stuff there. So appreciate those questions from my dad there. Interesting conversation looking at team and individual championships there. So we appreciate those too. Then last few questions we have here. This one now comes from my sister. So I know I mentioned my family throwing out questions here. So good looks there. But here we go. My sister Kira, she says, funny question here. Actually, this one made me laugh a lot. He says, what was the last book you read? So this is actually a very funny question because most of the time, like I actually like sit down to read a book is because I'm forced to. Like it's very rare that I'll just be like, you know what, dude, today I'm gonna read a book. Like that just doesn't happen. So she's kind of just like making fun of me for that. But I actually had to think about this like a lot. Like when was the last time I actually like read through a full book? And honestly, I think it was like my junior year of high school. I'm gonna be a senior in college this year. Like I haven't actually like read through a book since then that I could like fully guarantee. And it was like Fahrenheit 451. I think that was the name of the book that I actually read. But a lot of times like when I read stuff it's like on Twitter or like I prefer like podcasts or videos, so like I'm just not a huge like sit down and read a book guy. So that was the answer I came up with. Maybe I've read a book since then, but
Yeah,
I can't
I
confirm
know
it.
the
So
last book I read was
I'll go
actually
with
the
Fahrenheit
Vince Scully
451 for this one.
autobiography a couple months ago. When I was really missing baseball in general. I think it's called Pull Up a Chair. Just Vince Scully, one of the guys that I grew up with that just basically ran sports. As a Dodger fan, you grew up. It's time for Dodger baseball is you know classic. It's legendary. So I think Vince Scully's autobiography is the last one I read.
Yeah, that's a good choice. I bet that would be a good big Vin Scully fan there. I know Donnie. It's time for Dodger
Yeah,
baseball.
literally
That's a
classic.
big
It's like
favorite for
everybody's
Donnie
heard
there.
it at
So
some point.
that's a good one. Yeah, good stuff. Vin Scully's the man. So interesting question there. But yeah, I'm just not a huge book guy. That's just an interesting fact. So there you go. There's a little more information, but interesting question there. Two more questions here. She says, "What would you do for a Klondike
It
bar?" So
depends on the
Donnie, I'll let you
situation.
go
I'd
first
say,
here. What would you do for a
I
Klondike
don't
bar?
know, like climb a tree. I don't know, run a lap. It's like I don't think I'm gonna go out of my way for a Klondike bar. Not a big Klondike bar fan in the first place. But if I had to do something, it's like you tell me to run a quarter mile for a Klondike bar. I guess I would probably do it. I mean, it sounds like a fair trade to me, at least. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good deal. I feel like I don't have ice cream sandwiches like all that often. When I do, I'm like, oh, that was pretty solid. I've had Klondike bars before, but it's been a little bit. It's like, what would I do for a Klondike bar? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like running a quarter mile, that's pretty good. Or like, I'm a big stationary bike guy when I work out, so like, I'll bike like 6 miles for a Klondike bar. I guess there you go. There's my shout there. My sister and I actually, the question asked here, we both learned how to bike for the first time this summer. I'm 20 and she's 23, so like it's been a little bit of time, but hey, we better late than never. We actually
That's
learned how to
okay. You
ride
don't need
bikes. There you go. I
you
guess
really
I
need to
guess I'll ride a
know.
bike
Like
for a
it's
Klondike
fun,
bar.
but other than that, it's like you don't need to know how to ride a bike, honestly.
Yeah, as I said, like I'm a stationary bike guy. Like it turns out, like bike riding is actually pretty fun. Like I've done it now a few times this summer. It was cool. I know that's mostly a thing that people learn when they're like six,
Never
but
been
hey, I
prouder.
mean,
Never been
I finally
prouder.
figured it out. I finally got there with the bike rides. Thank you. All right. Last question. This one's an interesting one. She says, "Do you have any irrational fears?" This was something Donnie and I talked about here before the podcast, but this is a big caveat. Irrational fears. Like you could be like, "Oh, I'm scared of snakes." Like, yeah, man, everybody's scared of snakes. Like, I'm not just going up to a snake and like being its
Yeah,
friend, but
over the
like
last hour, I've
irrational
thought about this,
fears.
and I
Do you
think
have any
having
answer
somebody that
here,
comes up
Donnie?
to me when I get in my car and hit me in the ankle with a laser
Okay.
scooter, I think that's an
Yeah.
irrational fear. I just don't think I'd want to deal with that. Just thinking about it, every time you get in the car, somebody comes up and smacks you in the ankle. It's like you can't even prepare for it; it just happens. It seems semi irrational, but I guess it could happen.
Yeah, that's a good answer there. Obviously, going back to Josh's question, I mean, razor scooters the ankle, that sucks. Like, you definitely don't want that. But here we go. Irrational fears. I mean, like, my biggest fear is just like letting
That's
myself
morbid.
down. I know that's like maybe not that irrational, but like, you know what? Like, that would suck. Like, I don't want to do something and later I'm like, man, I wish I hadn't done that. So like, it's just kind of like myself. But I don't know if that's necessarily irrational. So I'll give a funny story here. So when I was in like fourth grade, my family and I, we got like a basketball hoop outside, and I was, I was trying to like, I was so excited that we got this hoop. I was trying to like put it up, and I like lift it up like back on the back on its side so we could like have a normal hoop, and the hoop fell over and smashed into my thumb. So I had like a purple thumb for like 2 or 3 months. So like this hoop literally just came down and just like destroyed my thumb. Like nothing broke. It was okay. It was just looking purple for a couple months. So I mean, I guess like basketball hoops falling on
Yeah, I
me.
mean
I guess that's like
that's
an
something that's
irrational
happened in the
fear. I mean,
past that you
that's
don't want to
not
happen
the
right
most
now. I
fun
mean, I
thing in the
guess
world.
it's irrationally rational. I think. I don't know.
Okay, I like that. Rationally irrational. We're getting into
Yeah, sometimes you
the
got to
nitty
dig
gritty here
deep, and I think
about
you
specific
dug deep.
fears. I like it. Yeah, there we go. So really good questions there from everybody. Good podcast here. A lot of interesting sports news at the top. It's so nice to have sports back, isn't it? I mean, we talked all summer. We were like, oh, when are sports going to come back? All this. We're still talking about COVID and bullshit, but we actually have sports on, so that's really nice. Obviously, Stanley Cup playoffs, one of my favorite events of the year, so excited to have that back. But good stuff this podcast. I'm not going to send it over to Donnie to wrap us up, but yeah, thanks everybody for listening. We much
Yeah,
appreciate
check Wes
it.
if you want to get on
But
the
yeah, Donnie,
podcast.
go
Feel
ahead.
free.
Go
Other than
ahead and
that,
say farewell to all our listeners.
everybody listens every week. We really appreciate it. Send in your questions as per usual at Roth Podcast at Rokale23. I still don't have Twitter. Taking a break here. But yeah, very much appreciated for everybody that comes and listens. And we will talk to you probably again next week. Peace.
Okay, there's moments where I feel like I'm the hottest. My baby not religious, but she look just like a goddess. They want me to flex, they don't want me to be modest. In 2027, I'll be purchasing a cottage.